There's a moment after something has happened where the experience is still yours, untouched, unquestioned, exactly as you felt it. And then you start to think about saying it out loud. You replay it, turn it over, soften parts of it, question others, trying to find a way to tell it that won't sound impossible. Because once it leaves you, once it becomes words, it's no longer just yours. It lands in someone else, and with that comes something you can't control. Doubt, silence, a look that lingers just a little too long. Maybe they laugh. Maybe they explain it away before you've even finished speaking. Maybe they don't say anything at all, and somehow that feels worse. So you learn what to say, what not to say, who to tell, and who to stay quiet around. And over time, the story changes. Not because it didn't happen, but because the world had already decided how it should be heard. Welcome to What Would They Say? I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm recording this episode on the lands of the Awabakal people. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. Aboriginal cultures are built on deep traditions of storytelling, of knowledge being shared, held and passed through generations. Stories that aren't dismissed but listened to, respected, carried. As we move through this conversation, exploring what it means to speak about personal experience and to be truly heard, I want to acknowledge the strength and continuation of those traditions and the importance of creating spaces where stories can be shared with care and received with respect.
I was afraid of the ridicule, and I did cop it. I reached a point a few years ago where I realised that I was not interested in the slightest in proving anything to anyone. I don't care what other people believe about this. If you want to communicate with Yowies, if you want that connection, they're interested in what sort of heart you have. There are other things that we need to be scared of. They're not one of them. We are guardians of this planet just like they are, and we've dropped the ball.
In our last episode with Sarah, we spent some time sitting with encounters themselves, what people are seeing, the patterns that come through, and those moments that don't quite fit into explanation. But this week, the conversation shifts. Because experiencing something is one thing, saying it out loud is something else entirely. And this part of the conversation, this is the part that really stays with me. As someone who has shared my own lived experience with suicide and mental health publicly, I understand what it feels like to say something out loud that people don't fully understand, the judgment that can come with that, and the ways in which it can be received. And because of that, I honestly cannot fathom why people would choose to share experiences like this with the level of vulnerability that they do. But they do. And that's the thing that keeps bringing me back to this space. I'm joined again by Sarah Bignell, host of Yowie Central, where she's spent years speaking to people who have had experiences they often don't feel comfortable sharing anywhere else. In this episode, we're stepping into that side of it. What it costs to speak, the reactions people receive, the skepticism, the ridicule, and also the importance of having somewhere to go where you can just be heard, and the personal cost to holding that space. Sarah, in the last episode, we spoke about the encounters themselves, but I want to start with what happens after. When someone first shares their experience with you, what state are they usually in?
It depends on how long ago the experience has happened. But saying that, as those words were coming out of my mouth, I was then thinking, but hang on, even people who've experienced something decades ago when they're retelling that story, you can hear the emotion in their voices. They start out calm and a bit shy and bashful and think and you can tell they're thinking, I'm a bit nervous about sharing this story to anyone. When people start getting into the nitty-gritty of their experience and their mind has travelled back to how they were feeling at the time, all of that emotion comes pouring out. And I've heard men who appear to be, big, strong, tough, masculine men, you can hear their voices trembling. You can hear the tears. You can hear the fear. They often say they can feel that fear rise up in them again. So generally when people are sharing their experience, they're traumatized. Most people are traumatized. And I'm a trained social worker and worked with victims of crime and various other fields within social work where you're dealing with people who are victims, who've suffered something awful. And I often recognise the signs of PTSD in the people that I'm speaking to. The emotion that they were feeling at the time comes pouring out, often regardless of when it actually happened, whether it was recent or whether it was decades ago. They often then spend time after it's happened, particularly if they've not known much about Yowies and don't know who to reach out to talk to. They spend often months, if not years, going to bed and thinking about it every night. It goes around and around and around in their heads. And whenever they're out in a sort of similar situation, if they're out bush again or they're out camping, if they go out again, that emotion, it comes back all the time. It's life-changing. Most of these experiences are life-changing, paradigm-changing experiences, even if it's only been a few seconds. They've seen something that's not supposed to exist and that they've been told is a monster. That has a huge impact on the rest of their lives. Huge.
Do people tend to tell you about the reactions that they receive from other people when they share their stories?
Yeah, and usually what they say is that they shared it with a few close people, maybe even their spouse, maybe their siblings, maybe their uncles and aunties, good friends. The response is generally that they are laughed at and ridiculed or simply not believed and called crazy. That's a really common response. And sadly, that means that those people then sit on that story and that experience. They carry it around like a burden. They suffer the PTSD all by themselves. They've got no emotional support around, what happened. They've got no one to talk to about it. And they were ridiculed when they shared it. I mean, imagine telling your wife or your husband about something like that and them going, oh, bullshit. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on
Yeah,
your
you are,
show,
absolutely.
Imagine sharing that and the person you married doesn't believe you and laughs at you. Like, I've had so many people say that to me. Although not everyone, one man I know who had a really traumatic experience couldn't bring himself to share it with his wife or kids for 6 months.
Wow.
He finally did. But he had to go to a doctor. He didn't tell them what happened, but he said he was feeling a lot of anxiety and he was given medication, but he couldn't actually really share what had happened with his close family until 6 months later. But yeah, the ones who do share are usually faced with ridicule. Hence why I've had a few reports that have come in. They say, I just need to talk to you about it. I don't want it published. I live in a small town. If my voice is recognised, even if you give me an alias, if my voice is recognised, I will be run out of town. Like, I will be excommunicated. And that's part of what drives me to keep doing this show, is that little by little I'm helping break down a stigma that has caused immense suffering to a lot of people. And I think that's really sad. And that suffering that people go through, the disbelief, the ridicule, it's not nice when something huge, life-changing has happened to you and you share it and people don't believe you and they laugh at you and they call you crazy, or they start avoiding you because they think you're bonkers. You can talk about that in a lighthearted way, but if you live that experience It's really traumatic. On top of the trauma you've already experienced, you're then faced with ridicule, and it's not nice. Even when I started sharing the mind speak experiences that started about 3.5 years ago, when I started talking about that publicly, and I didn't for at least 6 months, because even me doing my own show, I was afraid of the ridicule, and I knew, and I did cop it. When I first started talking about MindSpeak, the comments I got on social media were like, you've just lost all credibility as a researcher, and I'm thinking, I've done hundreds of interviews, and you're saying to me that all of my work now is not worth anything because I told you something that you don't believe, and that really happened to me, but that you don't believe it. Like, it's really strong, that urge to ridicule people who are telling you something you don't believe. Even my sister, I don't mention this stuff very much in family gatherings because, she rolls her eyes and thinks I'm an idiot. I totally get why people are afraid to share under those circumstances.
As someone who is very honest about her own struggles with mental health and that I survived a non-fatal suicide attempt, I understand a little bit about the vulnerability that it takes to be open. I understand what it's like to speak about really, really hard things that other people might not understand or be able to wrap their head around. And I've never had anyone say to me, well, that didn't actually happen. The stigma is real, like, maybe you did it for attention, or, there's some harsh stuff in there that I've copped.
Yeah.
But there are real tangible costs to being honest about these experiences. And this is the thing that keeps me coming back. Outside of my own curiosity and my own belief systems, I cannot understand for the life of me why somebody would just make a story like this up. People don't get paid to come on your podcast. No.
I barely get paid, let alone any guests getting paid.
So there's nothing, they're not getting famous for it. There's not another podcast out there that's them reaching out to them, and they're building a career on their Yowie sighting. That's not how this works. I'm wondering what kind of, have you had this kind of feedback come towards you? Like, I've got nothing to do with Yowie research and people say it to me just if I'm having a conversation about it. So I wonder what it's like to actually live and work in this space and to invest yourself into it and then be met with that disbelief. But it's almost like people want to make you smaller for sharing your truth.
Yeah. My skin is much thicker these days. When I first started the show and first started doing, I was so keen to prove to mainstream society that these beings existed, and so therefore other people's opinions on the subject matter and of me were important to me. Nowadays, though, 6.5 years later, I reached a point a few years ago where I realised that I was not interested in the slightest in proving anything to anyone. I don't care what other people believe about this. If you're one of the fortunate ones who've experienced this and believe in this, then awesome. If you're not, that's fine. I feel sorry for you, actually, because you're missing out on something really cool. But you have to develop a thicker skin. It's not nice. It's a really awful feeling when people don't believe you, or they're making fun of you, or they think you're crazy. It's a horrible feeling. I'm convinced that there are many, many more people out there who've experienced these beings who have said nothing publicly because they're afraid, and with reason, they're afraid of what will happen if they do. I just had to keep reminding myself that what other people think is none of my business, for a start. So I can't change what they think. What they think of me is none of my business. How they react to me can hurt, but when it comes down to it, fundamentally, I know what I experienced. I know what I believed. What other people think of me is something that I can't control, and therefore I have to step back from it, because it's too upsetting if you let it get to you. And I completely understand why many people don't come forward, because they don't want their families and friends treating them differently and thinking about them differently. I know my mum, she would never say this to my face, but I suspect she thinks I'm a bit bonkers. That I'm a bit weird, and I'm her black sheep child that believes in all this weird shit that her other children don't. I can tell sometimes there's something going on, but she would never say that to me. But she doesn't believe in any of this at all, and tells me not to tell her anything because she'll never go out in the bush again. She'll never go walking in the country again. So yeah, it's hard. It's not nice. But you do. I've ended up developing a thick skin about it. And now, like, when I think about my life before I did this work and now, my life is so much richer and so much more interesting and so much more deeply spiritual now. The benefits of doing this work outweigh by far the cons of doing this work. So I remind myself of that regularly.
Yeah.
That I've got, for me, this is with my skill set and my experience and my areas of passion and interest, I have the perfect job for me. And I get to talk to all these interesting people who have all these incredible stories to share. I get to do that every day. And so that outweighs any negativity that I might. I mean, I went to a wedding with my husband, and I spoke to someone in his family who I hadn't really spoken to before. They were fascinated, and it turns out they listened to the show, and I was like, oh, what a pleasant surprise, going to a family gathering where people are actually interested in this subject, which is really nice, really nice. My family aren't. Well, my dad is a little bit, but it is such a joy when you happen to bump into someone who's into the subject.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. Do you ever feel the weight of being sometimes the only person that people share their experiences with? You have them face to face for a little while you get to listen to them share their experience. But if it is somebody that you're seeing some signs in that there could be some trauma lingering there, how does that work for you?
I have a handful of mental health specialists who've reached out to me privately and said, I am, look, these are my qualifications. I have also had my own experiences, so I know how to work with these people. If you interview someone who needs ongoing counselling and needs more mental health support than you can give them, please refer them to me. I'm qualified to do mental health first aid. I'm not a counsellor. Social work and counselling often get confused. I can recognise when someone needs ongoing support, and I have a handful of people that I can refer them to. Getting them to actually accept that help is a little bit challenging. Like I find people often, once they've spoken to me, they just want to talk to me. And that becomes difficult because I'm very busy and I don't have the time to give someone who needs regular support. So I do sometimes feel bad because I know they're not into counselling, but they've spoken to me and I've listened and they felt great after talking to me. And so they only want to talk to me, which can be difficult because as I said, I'm not really qualified to help people. If you're talking about something traumatic and healing from something traumatic, you need the skills to know how to open that up and to close it down and end the session in a way where that person is not open, raw and emotionally bleeding. So I'm fully aware where the limits of my skills are. And luckily I do have people I can refer those people to.
That's amazing. I didn't at all expect that answer from you, and I think it definitely demonstrates to me, but I think to anyone listening, just how seriously you take the well-being of the people that you speak to. And it's not just a thing to make a podcast out of. You not only care about these beings, which you've been incredibly open about, but you also care about the people who are coming into contact with them.
I've also had another mental health specialist reach out to me recently and offer their services. So if any of your listeners have had traumatic experiences and they need to talk to someone ongoing when it comes to the supernatural side of things or the spiritual side of things, they can reach out to you and I can give you contact numbers if needs be, because there aren't many. And I know people who have been locked up in psychiatric institutions for sharing with mental health professional their sighting, something Yowie, paranormal, alien, ET, that sort of stuff that's happened to them. And they've had their freedom taken away, which is so horrific, so horrific. I can't even imagine how horrific that experience. Well, I can imagine, but I don't think I can really live that experience, that they've gone through.
Yeah.
So I really saw when I started doing this work and I started doing lots of interviews for AYR, I realised with my social worker hat, my God, all these people are so traumatised, like seriously traumatised, and they're not getting support from anyone. Even most of the people who do this kind of podcast, there are a few others out there, they're not getting any emotional support. It's very transactional. You can't do that to people. You can't. You can't go ahead and publish someone's story and you're getting a benefit out of this, and it's just this one-sided energetic exchange where you're just taking from this person and you're leaving them there with no support. It's unconscionable as far as
100%. Sarah, what have you learnt about people through the work that you do?
Okay, so one of the things I've learnt is that given some encouragement, most people start thinking about these beings with a sense of awe and wonderment. If you let them know that they probably weren't in any danger and were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, they start to then be able to tap into that childlike sense of wonder that we all were born with. And that kind of gets a rebirth. And a lot of people get really excited about that sense of that there are other beings, and it's all really amazing. And how cool is this?
The world is actually magic.
The world is actually magic. Magic is real. People start getting back in touch with that inner child that was allowed to believe in magic. And I think that's really important, and I think it's really special.
That's a beautiful answer.
I can tell you that it's interesting that even though something might have happened a long time ago, people seem to be able to remember vividly, in detail, aspects of what happened to them. They might not remember everything, especially if it's decades ago, but because it was so life-changing and so impactful, people often remember little details, which for me is everything, because it's the little details that I'm interested in.
Do you think doing this work has changed the way you listen to people more broadly, like even outside of Yowies? I listen to the way that you interact with people when you don't interview them, you just allow them to tell their story and maybe ask a few questions towards the end. I'm really interested in the way that you seem to pick up on things that people might be holding and invite that out of them without putting words into their mouth, which I think when you are dealing with a topic like Yowies, it is very important not to do.
Can't lead the witness, yeah.
I wonder, is that a skill that you learnt maybe through social work, or is it a skill that you learnt through interviewing people about Yowies and paranormal and all the woo that exists, well, let's call it magic, all the magic that exists in the world? It's a fascinating skill.
It stems from, I'm a really curious person. I want to know about everything and I want to know it now. Everyone I speak to, it might be just someone I've just run into, it could be a random meeting with someone. I have an understanding that I can learn a lot about the world from everyone that I talk to, and I'm really curious about how things work. And so I innately want to listen and learn. And so I listen carefully and I ask lots of questions. Some of it is learnt skills. So when I first started editing interviews, in fact, when Dean Harrison first started editing the interviews that I was doing for him, he would complain to me if I interrupted too much, or if when you talk in a normal conversation, you have little social cues to show someone that you're actually listening to them. You do this quite well, actually.
Oh, thank you.
You go, and that I realised that I did it all the time. And so Dean would complain to me. He said, you would just shut up for once, let them finish, stop into it, because then I've got to stop and I've got to edit out. Every time you do, I've got to edit it out.
Megan tells me the same thing all the time.
So, and I still do it sometimes, and I edit my own out, but I'm better at it than I was before. I'm better at it at just staying zipped. But I warn people before I start the interview. I say, tell me everything you can in as much detail as you can, and I won't interrupt you. And so then they know that if they don't hear from me, that they can just keep talking. I do often tell them that I mute my microphone while they're talking. And so then they don't stress that they're not hearing anything either. So then that just encourages people to give me as much detail as they can. And my microphone's muted, so even if I go, it's not on the recording. It does take practice. Yeah. It takes practice, and I still don't get it perfect, to be honest. It's that genuinely in my heart being fascinated and curious with the story that someone is telling me. I also need to be, while I'm interviewing, I'm multitasking. I'm listening. I'm also thinking about the next question. I'm putting into my memory the important details of what they're telling me so I can circle back and ask them a question about it. If someone describes a scene and I can't picture that in my head, that's where I'm going back. And I'm going to go back and ask them questions until I can picture that vividly in my own head. And so it's just basically getting someone to tell you the whole story, reassuring them that you're not going to interrupt, and making notes about things. If you can't see what they're talking about in your head, then you need to go back and ask more questions about it. Yeah. That's the way I do it. It works, but I still don't get it perfect though. Every now and then I talk over someone and I'm like, I've not edited it. I've not stopped and gone, can you say that again? So I'll have to leave in this bit where I'm talking over someone, and that gets a bit annoying. But luckily it's less and less these days.
What do you think is the most important thing about holding this space for other people?
By holding this space for people, and it's not easy because I do cop aggression from some people, and I cop nasty private messages, and I cop bullying. But why holding this space is so important to me is that witnesses to this kind of phenomena have no other forum to share their stories in. There's nowhere else they can talk about what happened. They can't talk about it to their friends, to their families. They can't talk about it at large in society. They can't talk about it to a counsellor or a psychologist. There's got to be somewhere where they can feel safe to share this experience, safe from ridicule, and somewhere where they're going to be believed. And so that's a big part of why holding this space is important to me. It's also important because part of my mission now is getting across to people what the Yowie people think and what they want us to know as humans about the planet and about our history and about what's really going on in the world. They're trying to help us, and they chose me as someone with a voice who could help them get their message through to everyone else. And so that's another really important part of why I do what I do. and why I spend so many hours every week working on the show and earning very little money to do it, is that forum, that safe space, holding a safe space and getting their message across. They're the two biggies.
What do they want us to know, Sarah?
They want us to know about Beyond the Veil. They want us to know about all the other beings that are out there. They want us to help regain that ability to see them and to see all the other beings that are existing alongside of us. They're wanting to help us raise our electromagnetic frequency so that we can interact with them and see them. When we do that, we become kinder, more generous, more considerate, respectful people. People with those qualities make a better planet to live on, a better community to live in. They want us to thrive. And if we're thriving, they're thriving, everyone else on this planet is thriving. And at the moment, we're in a state where we're not thriving. We're damaging the planet to the point where we're going to tip past the point of no return, and there won't be any saving it. And they want that to change before it's too late. They want us to understand our true nature, our true power, the fact that everybody can mind speak, everybody can see these beings. You just have to be taught how to do it. And you also have to, if you want to communicate with Yowies, if you want that connection, they're interested in what sort of heart you have. And if you don't have a good heart, you've got no chance. And so it's kind of a motivation to get people to think about, behind closed doors, what kind of a person are they? Not publicly, what kind of a person are they behind closed doors? The Yowies, and I'm actually referring to not just the Australian Yowies, but I'm talking about the forest people around the world, on the whole planet. They're helping us fight a battle. The battle that we're fighting now is to rediscover what and who we were meant to be. We've been derailed, and it's not entirely our fault. We have been derailed, though, and they're trying to help us get back to who we really are and what we're really supposed to be doing. And that is, we are guardians of this planet just like they are, and we've dropped the ball. They're trying to help us pick that ball up.
Doesn't sound like something we need to be scared of, does it?
No. There are other things that we need to be scared of. They're not one of them.
Sarah, I just want to say thank you, not just for your time and willingness to share, but for the way you show up in this space, for your ability to listen without judgment, to hold stories that a lot of people wouldn't know what to do with, and to create a place where people feel safe enough to share them in the first place. I think conversations like this, they don't necessarily need to give us answers, but they do open something. They ask us to look at things a little differently, to stay curious a little longer than we normally would. And I think that matters. For anyone listening who's feeling that curiosity or wants to spend a bit more time in this space, where can they find you, Sarah?
They can find me on all the major podcast platforms. And now they can find me on YouTube. We are in the process of converting all of the audio podcasts into a video format. And little by little, we're adding all the podcasts. I'm working on 181 that I'm about to publish tomorrow. I think on YouTube we're at 106. My beautiful colleague Jasmine Winter is in the process of putting all those videos together and uploading them. So
she's doing a fantastic job. They look amazing.
Isn't she amazing? Yeah. I would be lost without her. Totally lost. She did the designs for all the T-shirts, organised all the videos for me. She's just amazing. So, yeah, so you can find me on all the major podcast platforms and YouTube now too. You can also find me on yowiecentral.com. You can check out all the episodes there, and you can also make a report. If you've had anything weird, seen anything kooky or spooky, seen any yowies or any other strange entity, you can make a report on my website, which is yowiecentral.com.
I hope that one day we hear some of our listeners talking to you, Sarah, or I do. I hear some of our listeners talking to you.
That would be awesome.
I think what this conversation really leaves me sitting with is not just what people are seeing out there in the bush. It's what it means to have an experience that stays with you. Something you felt, something you saw, something that didn't just pass but settled. and then what it takes to speak about it, to find the words, to decide who feels safe enough to tell, to weigh it up whether it's worth the risk of not being understood. Because these aren't just stories, they're moments people carry, and then there's the way we respond to them. Because when something sits outside of what we understand, we tend to shape it. We give it form, a name, sometimes even turning it into something that feels easier to hold by making it something to fear. We do that with a lot of things we don't understand. We make them smaller, stranger, less real. But what if that's not the only way to meet it? What if instead of trying to explain it away or turn it into something it may not be, we allowed ourselves to stay curious, to ask, what might be there to learn? Or maybe more importantly, what we might learn from them. Because I don't think this is just about Yowies. I think it's about how we respond to anything that doesn't fit neatly into our understanding of the world.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If These Trees Could Talk and What Would They Say are productions of Bellevue Studio. Our host is Shannon Walters, executive and audio production by Megan Anderson, with socials and marketing managed by Mia Oberdorf. We always appreciate hearing your thoughts, so if you would like to support the show, you can rate, review and subscribe. To stay up to date between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. For more information on this episode or to connect with our guests, you'll find everything you need to know in the show notes at ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. We're grateful to have you with us, and we look forward to sharing what comes next. Thanks for being here.